Hello, everybody. I'm late. We only have about an hour, so let's go right into it. Tonight, we're not going to be doing Fashion File. We're going to be doing Burned Alive. And for those who are wondering, yes, I already told you I'm into fashion. I've been reading fashion magazines since I was 11 years old, 12 years old.
When you're looking for the best solution to grow your business,
And then John the 23rd, at that time, was also an anti-pope, not to be confused with the real Pope John.
when you're looking for the
Hot
best
dog
solution,
it. It's a cheap trick.
Voice of reason. And today's episode is going to be a very happy episode for me, a very, very happy episode, because I get to respond to somebody who's good. I have
think
a
this is her
brand new
voice?
favorite patron. My favorite patron, his name is Alex, like me. He's my favorite patron now because he actually sent me a great video, a video that I really liked, that he asked me to respond to. Now, I love all of my patrons, but as some of you know, some of my patrons, they send me some interesting characters to respond to. And that makes me feel like I'm going crazy. So it's nice to actually get to finally respond to somebody that I actually really like, really appreciate, and really respect. And that is none other than my good friend,
Yes, Lewis.
Mike, known on TikTok as True Christian Ministry. So Alex, my friend,
It ain't B.S. Lewis. It ain't real. Word.
I want to thank you for asking me to review a video from my friend Mike. I'm very excited to review this. So let's see what my good friend Mike has to say.
So let's talk about a little bit of crazy history, shall we? We all know about Martin Luther, but how many of you know about Jan Hus? Jan Hus was born in 1370, and he died July 6th, 1415, which is 100
And he was immortal.
years prior to the Protestant Reformation. Now, you can go look him up, but I'll just share a little bit about him.
He lived 1,000 years. Wait, that's not how math works.
So he existed during a time when the Roman Catholic Church was extremely divided. I'm talking about more than one pope at the same time.
This is actually not true. When people say that in the 15th century, there was this situation in which there were three popes at the same time, that's actually not true. There were not three popes at the same time. There was actually only one pope, one true valid pope, and then there were two other guys that were claiming to be the pope, but they were not the pope. They were both anti-popes. So that's a big misconception in history that a lot of people think that there were three valid popes. No, there has always only ever been one valid pope at one time, and any other popes that claim to be the pope that weren't really the pope, that's what we call anti-popes. So this episode of history here that Mike is referring to is an episode of history where there was one pope and two anti-popes all at the same time. And that was, of course, Pope Urban VI, who was
Mike, it's not a
actually
drink,
one
'cause that
of
was
the
a lot
worst
of
popes that
popcorn
we've
really
ever had. He was such a bad pope that he caused the cardinals to actually elect somebody else to be the pope, even though the cardinals didn't have the authority to do that. And they elected anti-Pope Clement VII, and both Pope Urban VI and anti-Pope Clement VII each had a few successors over the course of quite a few decades. And then eventually, because of the conflict of there being the true pope and the anti-pope, some of the cardinals thought that it would be smart to get together to elect a third guy to be the pope to get rid of the other two popes, but that didn't work either. That just created a second anti-pope, and that was anti-Pope John the 23rd. So, Pope Urban VI and his successors were always the true valid popes. Pope Clement VII and his successors were not. They were anti-popes. And then John the 23rd at that time was also an anti-pope, not to be confused with the real Pope John the 23rd, who was the pope who opened the Second Vatican Council. But anyway, the more you know, it's good. So let's hear more about
I'm assuming he said
what
nothing
Mike has to
important.
say about this very interesting time in church history.
And if you don't know
I'm assuming he said nothing important and nothing relevant.
anything about papal history, you should take a look at it. It's pretty wild. There was one pope that dug up the previous pope because there was a rivalry between the two. So even though the previous pope died, he still wanted to get out his grudge. So he had the body dug up, dressed up like the pope, put on trial, grown men, bishops of God supposedly, standing in a room to hold trial on a dead body, and then they punished the dead body.
Okay, so this is 100% true. Everything he said is true, except right there at the end when he said that the bishops that were there, the grown men, bishops of God supposedly that were participating in this, it kind of makes it seem like they were all like in agreement with what was going on. They actually weren't. All of the bishops that were there, that were summoned by the Pope for this event, they were unwilling to participate, and they participated against their own will, just because they were afraid that the Pope was going to do something to them and hurt them. So they were all unwilling, and that's actually proven with how this story ends. But before I get to that, let's talk about what it is that Mike is speaking of here. He's actually talking about Pope Stephen VI. So Pope Stephen VI was the Pope in the year 896. He had a very short pontificate. His pontificate was like not even a year long. He was Pope from 896 to 897. This is true. Pope Stephen VI actually dug up the body of the previous Pope who had just died, Pope Formosus. He dug up Pope Formosis's body, put him on trial, condemned him as a heretic, and then the body was shackled to weights and it was thrown in the river. Crazy stories. So why did this happen? Well, it's kind of a long story, but basically this happened at a time when the Pope was not only just an ecclesial authority, but he was actually a civil authority. Because we need to remember that during this time, and actually going all the way back to the late 4th century, there was no separation of church and state. Church and state were distinct, but they were not separate from one another. They went hand in hand, they worked together. And what that means is that the Pope, as the head of the church, he worked hand in hand with the emperor, who was the head of the state, and they worked together. So the Pope, during this time, was indeed a bona fide politician. So what that means is that whenever a Pope would die and the new Pope had to be elected, there was actually
Has he got into John Hus yet? I'm going to fast forward.
like this, the shore of Italy. They buried him there, and then a whole bunch of miracles started happening, which were attributed to him being buried there. And one of the miracles that happened is that Pope Stephen VI, this evil pope that committed this act that Mike just described, he was actually deposed for what he does in the body. So what a indulgence is, it is a remission Eastern Orthodox to defend the Eastern Orthodox from the Muslims who were raided. It was.
There are 5.9.
I'm waiting for him to talk about John Hus, and I haven't heard him do it yet. I haven't heard him.
And the people that the popes that succeeded him, those were the true popes. So that's overrated.
That in his church there was this painting in the background, and on one side you have the Pope all decked out.
Ever sold the papacy. So he did that.
Council of Constance.
Oh, and by the way, really quick too. So the King of Germany wasn't only the King of Germany. The King of Germany was the Holy Roman Emperor. See, a lot of people don't realize this. They always think that the
All decked out, got the robes, the gold, riding on the white stallion. And on the
Francis like changing doctrine. He's not changing doctrine.
Are you going to talk about the actual title of this video, or am I watching this for no reason?
Jan Hus to death. The problem is that the church didn't do that. It wasn't the church. You can actually go all the way as far back as St. Augustine in the 5th century. St. Augustine was against the death penalty as a matter of prudence. St. Augustine said, let's not use capital punishment for people that are guilty of ecclesial crimes like heresy. He said, let's give them. This was actually leading a somewhat of a revolution in Bohemia, which is now known as the Czech Republic. And Bohemia back then, the Czech Republic, is right next to Germany, and there was tensions between the Bohemians and the Germans. They didn't like each other. There were tensions there, and Jan Hus was kind of the way that they see fit, and those ways can even change. There were times when the popes were elected just by the priests that were there in Rome. All of the priests would get together and they would pick somebody among themselves, and that would be the next pope. There are times when it would be just neighboring bishops in Italy that they'd all come together and they would pick amongst themselves who would be the next pope. And then in the Middle Ages, we had, because the pope was very deeply involved in politics around this time, we have the office of the papacy being sold, which did and actually that only happened with Pope Benedict IX. He was actually the only one that ever did this, and he did it twice.
So we're 20 minutes in and he's still not on topic.
Because Pope Benedict IX was the Pope three separate times. He's the only one that ever sold the papacy. So he did that. And then there were other means by which people ascended to the throne of... And by the way, when selling the papacy, that went against canon law even back then. So that was illegal. It doesn't mean that the people that bought the papacy... I
seriously don't believe that's his real voice.
...and became pope by buying their way into it, it doesn't mean that they weren't truly and validly the pope. It just means that the way that they became the pope was illicit because it went against canon law, because that's the sin of simony. But yeah, in the Middle Ages, there were all of these strange ways that people would become pope. But it's actually interesting when you look at when you look at history and you look at all of these examples, you see that a lot of these popes that became pope in shady ways, like in really shady ways, they never, ever, ever a single time were able to deface or do anything to injure the teachings of the church. They were never like papal encyclicals, what we call them now. They were some of the most beautiful works of the magisterium that have ever been produced, who were, the Holy Spirit does not allow even very evil and corrupt men to corrupt the teachings of the church.
Now let's get back to Jan Hus. Now they tried to have a trial with
22 minutes into his own video before he gets to the topic.
him, but he didn't come, and he ended up becoming...
So neither of these, yeah, I wouldn't watch either of theirs, but that's okay. That's okay. Go subscribe to this guy's channel. I don't know. Just fast forward to the end of the video to get to the point.
excommunicated. But the reason why
this is not his fault, because this could be just the way this guy formats stuff, and this guy could be into the topic right away. But this guy is who I'm going to blame for the bad formatting, that he put all that junk before he ever got to his point.
doesn't want to come is because there's a divide in the church. There's multiple popes.
So Jan Hus was excommunicated, but he actually wasn't excommunicated by the true pope, the valid pope. Remember, Jan Hus lived during the papal schism when there was 2 and then 3 popes. Well, 1 pope and then 1 anti-pope and then 1 pope and 2 anti-popes all at the same time. Jan Hus was not excommunicated by the true pope. Jan Hus was actually excommunicated by an anti-pope. I think it was Alexander V, who was one of the anti-popes, that excommunicated Jan Hus. And it wasn't enforced because everyone knew that Alexander V wasn't truly the pope. So you can actually go back in history and you can see that excommunication nobody took seriously, including Jan Hus. Nobody took it seriously until the Council of Constance happened, which I'm sure Mike is going to bring up next.
But then the King of Germany steps in and solves the Pope issue. The King of Germany forces them to call the Council of Constance.
Oh, and by the way, really quick too, so the King of Germany wasn't only the King of Germany. The King of Germany was the Holy Roman Emperor. See, a lot of people don't realize this. They always think that the Roman Emperor is always in Rome. But for the vast majority of the time of the Roman Empire, the Holy Roman Empire, that actually wasn't the case. By the end of the 4th century, the Roman Emperor had moved to the east, to Constantinople. And then actually by the time of the Holy Roman Empire, the Roman Emperor was actually the King of Germany. So if you were the King of Germany in the Middle Ages, you were the de facto Holy Roman Emperor. That's how it worked. The King of Germany was the Holy Roman Emperor. And a lot of people think that the Roman Emperor was always in Rome. And that just wasn't the case. And it was the King of Germany, the Holy Roman Emperor Sigismund. he was the one that actually was having problems with Jan Hus. You see, a lot of people think that Jan Hus was persecuted over strictly just religious issues, but that actually wasn't true. The religious issues were kind of
That's almost never absolutely the truth. It's almost always political issues or other issues that then when people are remembering the history, they only concentrate on the religious issues.
used as like an affront by Emperor Sigismund to persecute Jan Hus, because Jan Hus was actually leading a somewhat of a revolution in Bohemia, which is now known as the Czech Republic. And Bohemia back then, the Czech Republic, is right next to Germany, and there was tensions between the Bohemians and the Germans. They didn't like each other. There were tensions there, and Jan Hus was kind of...
This guy was a buddy of Reason and Theology for a while. I don't know if they had a falling out or not, like Reason and Theology has had with other former hosts.
encouraging the people, the civil authority in Bohemia, to kind of rise up against the king of Germany, who was also Holy Roman Emperor Sigmund. So Sigmund was actually kind of persecuting Jan Hus more for political reasons than church reasons, even though Jan Hus did have his faults when it came to his theology.
Now, in this, they also invited Hus to come and explain why is he saying the things he's saying. Hus was reluctant, but he decided to do it. The reason he decided is because they ensured him safe conduct, guaranteed safe conduct, no matter what the decision might be.
And again, that guarantee of safe conduct was given to Jan Hus not by the church, but by Emperor Sigmund, King of Germany. He was the one that told Jan Hus that he'd have safe conduct, not the church. So that was eventually broken, obviously, which I'm sure Mike is about to mention, but it was broken by the emperor, not by anybody in the church.
So Jan Hus went and he showed up to the Council of Constance and he was arrested. He did not receive the safe conduct as promised. He was arrested, imprisoned, and then tried as a heretic. When he refused to recant, he was sentenced to be burned. After they stripped him of his robes, pronounced him to be condemned not only in the flesh but in his spirit, they then told him he had to recant what he was saying, and he said he cannot. He was then burned alive after the Council of Constance, after they had their liturgy.
Okay, so there's something really, really, really important that my friend Mike here left out. And this is actually really, really important. It turns out that it wasn't the Council of Constance that burned Jan Hus alive. The Council of Constance actually found Jan Hus to be a heretic, and that was it. After the Council of Constance found him to be a heretic, right? And the Council of Constance, you know, the bishops there told him...
I'd be interested to see Gavin Ortlund respond to this, to see what his counters would be. I'm more interested in hearing his counters than I am in hearing this argument. But that's okay.
Over and over, be like, are you sure you want to go through with this? You know what's gonna, like, don't do this, because you know what they do, you know, to heretics, and they referring to the civil authorities. Jan Hus refused to recant his beliefs, so the council had no choice but to condemn him as a heretic. But then, after he was condemned as a heretic, he was turned over to the secular courts, to the civil courts, not to the ecclesiastical courts. The ecclesial courts did not order him to be burned alive. The ecclesial courts did not have him burned alive. He was turned over to the secular courts, and guess who was leading it? The King of Germany, Holy Roman Emperor Sigismund. He was the one that had Jan Hus burned alive. As a matter of fact, you can actually go and you can read the Council of Constance, and you can actually read where they specifically say that they're going to hand him over to the secular courts, and they do. If you actually go to session 15 of the Council of Constance, which was on July 6th of 1415, it says this. It says, "This Holy Synod of Constance, seeing that God's church has nothing more that it can do, relinquishes Jan Hus to the judgment of the secular authority and decrees that he is to be relinquished to the secular court." So that's a really, really, really important part that Mike left out. The Council of Constance did not condemn Jan Hus to death. The Council of Constance did not have Jan Hus burned alive. It was the secular courts led by Sigismund who had Jan Hus burned alive. And here's another thing. A lot of people, they believe in the myths that the Catholic Church was killing people for heresy. That's not true. That is just not true. That is one of the biggest myths of history. The Catholic Church never sentenced anyone to death. The Catholic Church never put anyone to death themselves.
The fact that other people who were Catholic did it in the name of the church, though, is the problem.
For the crime of heresy, heretics that were ever put to death were always put to death by the secular courts, not by the ecclesial courts. In fact,
That could be a distinction without a difference.
it's noted historically, it's well documented that there was always tension between the church and the state, because the state was very quick to execute people that were found to be heretics, and the church was actually always fighting with the state, telling them that they didn't want anybody to be put to death over it, that they wanted them to have a chance.
Yeah, but this also gives context to why, during the Council of Trent, the German Protestants, reformers, revolutionists would be hesitant to believe or trust in the guarantees of safety by the Council of Trent. It adds context, but not in the way that you probably wanted to.
To see the error in their ways and repent and recant and return to Orthodox Catholic.
So either the Catholic Church is lying and they're powerful and they control these secular courts through back channels, or the Catholic Church is incompetent and can't keep can't keep their word or honor it because they can't keep the secular authorities out of their business. Which one is it? Either one doesn't make us look good.
Christianity. That's what the church actually always wanted. You can actually go all the way as far back as St. Augustine in the 5th century. St. Augustine was against
If we go both and on that one, it really doesn't look good.
the death penalty as a matter of prudence. St. Augustine said, let's not use capital punishment for people that are guilty of ecclesial crimes like heresy. He said, let's give them a chance to think things over so that they can eventually, repent and turn to the true faith. And you can find that going all the way back to St. Augustine. So a lot of Protestants they like to bring up the change in the catechism that Pope Francis made, where Pope Francis said that we are that the death penalty is no longer admissible, that it's inadmissible. They think that that's an example of Pope Francis like changing doctrine. He's not changing doctrine. It's a prudential matter. He is not saying that the death penalty is immoral. He's not saying that the death penalty is evil. He is saying that the death penalty should not be permitted, that it should not be admissible with the other means that we have today of keeping criminals away from the general population of good civilians. So anyway, so again, the Catholic Church does not put people to death, right? Did not put people to death even back then in the Middle Ages. It was always the secular civil authorities. The Catholic Church actually tried its
Who was made up of Catholics? The secular authorities who were made up of Catholics.
best to
Even if Catholic by default.
save people from actually being put to death. And actually, Martin Luther was
Make that argument for Joan of Arc. I dare you.
one of those heretics that was condemned as a heretic, by the church, and the church actually didn't want Martin Luther to be put to death, and Martin Luther was actually able to escape being put to death by actually help of the Catholic Church, which is very ironic. But anyway, that was a really important part that Mike left out, but we're getting towards the end of the video here, so let's see how he's going to wrap up.
So after the Roman Catholic Church was divided with 3 separate people claiming to be the Pope,
And only one of them actually being the Pope at one time.
the way that it was solved was come together for a council and burn a heretic alive.
Oh, actually, so the Council of Constance did solve this papal schism. That was where Pope Martin V became the new pope, and all of the other popes they stepped down and they said, let's all just elect a new pope, and they elected Pope Martin V, and he was accepted by everyone involved, and the papal schism was fixed. And again, you go back and you read about the papal schism. It was clear the entire time who truly was the pope. So Martin V is the one that became the pope at the Council of Constance, but that had nothing to do with Jan Hus. That was a separate issue. That was more of like a tertiary issue with Jan Hus. They were more concerned with ending this bad schism. So no, Jan Hus had nothing to do with the papal schism. And again, when Jan Hus was excommunicated, he wasn't excommunicated by the true pope. He was excommunicated by the antipope, which means that Jan Hus actually wasn't excommunicated at all, because only the true pope can excommunicate you.
Okay, so here's then a trick question for you. Is John Hus considered excommunicated by the current pope and by the current papacy and the current magisterium? Is he considered a heretic in the church today? Or is he considered a saint by dying for Christ and his beliefs, therefore making him a martyr, which makes him an automatic saint? So is John Hus a saint in the Catholic Church? Don't be a hypocrite. Don't be chicken. Answer the question. And back it up with facts. Get me a source that I can look up and verify.
But when he was taken to the Council of Constance, turns out that he really was a heretic. They turned him over to the civil authorities, as I just read, and they did burn him alive. But anyway, that's unfortunate.
I would rather be wrong with my Bible alone than follow that church that did that.
Again, huge mistake here right at the very end. Mike said that he would rather be wrong with his Bible alone than follow the church that burned Jan Hus to death. The problem is that the church didn't do that. It wasn't the church. It was the civil courts, the secular courts that did it. It was Sigmund, King of Germany, Holy Roman Emperor. It wasn't the Pope. It wasn't an anti-pope. It wasn't any Catholic bishop. It wasn't the Council of Constance that did it. It was...
But the Council of Constance did find him a heretic. Yes or no? Actions have consequences. Declarations of a very powerful organization definitely have consequences. Don't chicken out. If you're going to believe in the authority, you can't chicken out on its implications and the consequences of those implications.
The civil authorities.
Do you consider John Hus a heretic now? Would you banish him from the church currently? Do you think his implications and his decisions were wrong? You said, oh, unfortunate. Do you think it was criminal, evil, that he was executed for his beliefs? You're not answering any of these questions. You're being an apologist. Don't be an apologist. Answer a question directly, please.
So, again, a really important part of history that got left out, and the conclusions that Mike draws from these...
Don't be dismissive. Answer the questions.
would actually be a false conclusion.
Answer the relevant questions, or this video is BS.
Because the church didn't do what he's accusing the church of doing. So this is...
Members of the Catholic Church did do it under an authority that was granted authority and why do I forget the word? Legitimacy by the Catholic Church.
This is why it's really important that we be deep in history, because the Catholic...
Did the Catholic Church sanctify, canonize, grant the kingdom, the kingship of the emperor, of his government? Did it bless it?
Church gets blamed a lot for things that it didn't do, and just for the sake of being fair, and I know that Mike knows this. Mike is super smart dude. He really knows this stuff. I'm sure that
I'm a jackass. I'm not pretending to be super smart. I'm just asking the relevant questions
Mike knows about
that you're not answering and you're not addressing. And instead, you're using a lot of pretty words to not say the truth, which makes me think you're an apologist, not a truth teller.
Like, in the Protestant Reformation, there were Protestants that were fighting each other too. And I'm sure that he knows that John Calvin, he personally burned another Protestant that he disagreed.
That's whataboutism. Interesting, but whataboutism? Give me a second as we go find a new video. No, it won't be the fashion file. Doop, 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 doop. I like Quillette, but I got a feeling if I watch their videos, they'll give me a strike or a claim, so I'm not going to do that. Bart Ehrman Hell video. I don't know. I want to watch a little bit of Authentic Observer. Let's watch some Base Camp, and then we'll call it a night. We'll go 30 minutes of Base Camp.
Sexy. Whether it's vampires or werewolves or witches. And the first sirens in Greek myths were seen as beautiful, attractive, and evil.
Yes.
But the stories were not told in a way that was designed to titillate you and make you desire the sirens. It was meant to teach you to be afraid of things that use beauty to attract people. Well, I mean, I think they were trying to moralize and show that other people will seduce you for evil purposes.
Well, witches just stole your penis while you were asleep or something. It wasn't like they seduced your penis.
I thought, look, I don't know, it could be a rumor, but some people are saying there's a few women in this town that steal penises. I feel like...
Let's put together commission, people. We need to investigate.
Look, I know it's probably not true, but better safe than sorry, right, guys?
Safe than sorry. Am I right?
I mean, look, that old crony panhandler lady, does she really contribute that much to the economy? Is it worth risking our penises? In this ultra-lefty mindset, ugly meant morally good.
Yeah.
Beautiful meant morally evil. However, these people are still humans, right? And they still are more aroused by things that are beautiful. So they need to uglify them within a context.
Holy smokes.
Would you like to know more?
Hello, Simone. I'm excited to be here with you today. Today we are going to discuss an interesting phenomenon, and it is interesting.
I really don't understand why they're never in the same room. That really does bother me.
Both in how lazily people dismiss it as a phenomenon.
Okay.
And in its implications for both our current culture, our evolutionary history, and humanity more broadly. Specifically, what I am talking about here is the modern phenomenon of evil things, or things that were historically evil, being coded as sexy. Whether it's vampires or werewolves or witches. And the first thing people will say is, of course evil things are sexy.
But they weren't always.
Is sexy. And I'll note two things. One, patently not true. We discuss it in our book. We'll get to the forbidden sexy wrongness. It's just wrong.
Yeah.
And then two, it wasn't always the case. In most cultures throughout history, even our own, evil wasn't sexy until the 80s, maybe? Okay, take something like vampires, right?
Yeah, original Dracula was not a snack.
Well, not just that, but you look at the revitalization of vampires.
That's not exactly true. You actually read Bram Stoker's, and he's not exactly... Yeah. No,
with Nosferatu,
Or
right?
you look at Carmilla, like that's total sexy vampire. Come on.
Yeah.
Like that was the popular vampire of when was Nosferatu popular?
But also,
But Dracula originally wasn't the ugly Dracula. He wasn't Nosferatu. He was handsome Dracula.
Dracula himself was not attractive per my memory, like in the book, in Bram Stoker's book, and in, of course, the original old movies. Was Interview with a Vampire really the first movie to sexualize
It was in the
vampirism?
30s, not
No, not at all. You know nothing about vampires.
too. Yeah, I think Interview is well. So keep in mind, Interview with the Vampire was done off of a
Carmilla, the vampire Carmilla it's a sexy film. It's a vampire film. There's Behind the Red Door. There's a ton of vampire films.
book that had already become popular that was sexualizing vampires.
Yeah.
So, as much as a culture nerd as I am, I
Vampire Lovers, which is I believe is also based off of Carmilla.
wasn't going to trust my off the head memory of was there any mainstream sexually charged vampire movies before Interview with a Vampire. So I went to AI to ask, and I got 2 mainstream sexually charged vampire movies. Or this is, I guess it shows how mainstream this was before this. One was the 1970s The Vampire Lovers. This Hammer horror film explicitly portrayed lesbian vampires and was quite sexually charged for its time. And then the 1972 Blackula. This blaxploitation film featured a suave, sexually appealing vampire protagonist.
Yes, I
And Carmilla was written before Bram Stoker's.
only hunt Blackulas. Man, I specialize in hunting black vampires. I don't know what the PC name for that is.
And I'm sure you can tell these are not at all cultural phenomenons in the way that Interview with a Vampire was. So it does appear that Interview with a Vampire was the cultural
You're wrong.
inflection point to sexy vampires being a mainstream concept.
But yeah,
No, well, vampires.
You literally have sexy gay vampires in not Fright Night, although Fright Night they also had sexy vampire, but you had it in Lost Boys. So you've already had sexy vampires. So I'm sorry, you're just not right. You don't know this. You're off in your wrong track. You're in the wrong field. You are an idiot in this one. How dare you come into my house and talk about my subject and get it wrong?
Were sexualized. There was a scene, for example, in the original Dracula book by Bram Stoker, in which women vampires in Dracula's castle were like, I don't know, kind of leering at the
but
poor.
here is the thing about the Bram Stoker Dracula sexualization of evil is it was very similar to like sirens historically.
Hey, it's Richard here.
I am the Vampire King. You see this uppity nose? You see this pointy ear? You see this blood that I'm drinking? Vampire.
Yeah.
In Greek myths were seen as beautiful, attractive, and evil.
Yes.
But the stories were not told in a way that was designed to titillate you and make you desire the siren.
I will say this. Carmilla is not titillating. That is true. Carmilla is not titillating. Nor is Barney the Vampire. Nor is Dracula. Although there is some titillation, some sexualization, sensualization in Dracula. I will say that. And there's also a little bit of seductiveness to Carmilla.
It was meant to teach you to be afraid of things that use beauty to attract people.
Yeah, Carmilla was teaching you to be afraid of, I think, the Romani and the gypsies and the Dracula was teaching you to be afraid of Catholics and Eastern Jews. Is it Eastern? Yeah, Western. Yeah, Eastern Jews.
If you look at
Eastern European Jews.
modern iterations of this, they are not treated like the sirens of old. It is about
It
glorifying.
was all about the danger of the stranger. And yeah, it did have some anti-Semitic themes and anti-Catholic themes.
The raw sexuality associated with some acts of evil, as we see in Interview with a Vampire. And this is also a really interesting thing of this phenomenon. I mentioned this to someone and they're like, oh, well, you know, Twilight, because this is what they go to in this generation. They're like, Twilight, you know, they're not really that evil, right? Like, they don't, like...
Well, there are the good vampires and there are the evil vampires. It depends on what faction you're in.
The movie that really created this genre, I would say, like really set it in stone, was, it's not the first. I don't know, was Dusk Till Dawn before this?
Let's see if you taste as good as.
If you're referencing Dusk Till Dawn on vampire references, you are a moron. It's okay. It's okay. I'm okay. Forever Night had sexy vampires. Forever Night from the 1980s had sexy vampires. 20 years before Dusk Till Dawn.
As your brother.
Maybe more like 15 years, 10 years before Dusk Till Dawn. Either way, because I don't remember when Dusk Till Dawn was.
But was Interview with a Vampire. And Interview with a Vampire, these guys are...
Forever Night was sexy vampires. Janet was amazingly sexy. Michael was sexy. Hell, even his vampire master had like a sex appeal to him, even though he was played by an elderly actor or older actor.
Unmitigatedly evil, killing innocent children.
Now I got to check out when Dusk Till Dawn was started. You see what you've done? You see what you've done? Now I got to find out when Dusk Till Dawn's. Dusk Till Dawn. Forever Night. Let me see. When was Forever Night? Forever Night. Well, I guess I can leave it here. When was Forever Night first released? I should have said when did it premiere. So 1992. Okay? Forever Night, Sexy Vampires. I thought it was older than that. 1992. Long before Dusk Till Dawn.
Children evil. Enjoying killing random people for fun evil. There is no
Stop putting clips with music on, please.
genuine redemption of them as any sort of a good thing. Outside of they care for other vampires sometimes and with conditions.
No, the vampires in Carmilla and Barney and I'm trying to think of a few other ones. Even the vampires in although I'm not as familiar with the guy who wrote Sherlock Holmes, not as familiar with his vampires. Even they're evil. They're all evil. So I don't even know what he's talking about here.
That is the totality of their plot development as characters, okay? And I would note, this is not me shitting on the movie. I actually love Interview with a Vampire. I think it's fantastic.
Long. It's long. But everyone in it's really good. Young Kirsten Dunst is amazing in it.
It's like Braveheart good. Like I consider it like a true classic level good. And I would note,
Sexy
that
vampires.
In this period, you had other iterations of this. It wasn't just vampires; it was like witches as well. So
Sexy
you know,
vampires,
so you're
sexy witches
well,
too.
You know,
Okay, let's see. When is this book? When does this book first come out? Oh, it's so short. You know, I got 2 copies of this one. The 2 translations. I might have given one away. Hold on, let me see. When is Carmilla? Oh, there we go. When was Carmilla first published? 1872, Sexy Vampires. By the way, this was published before Bram Stoker.
again, not evil. And I point out something like The Craft, right? The Craft was an early movie that really, really glorified the Wiccan movement.
You're a witch! They were right.
Nancy, come on, get off the bed, let's go. She's a witch too, you know.
Hold on, let me see. So that's 1872. 1847, you have this guy. Not as sexy, but still. I think this one is considered the first vampire story ever told. Both volumes. We got Vampire Forensics. That's not. Blood of the Vampire. This is 1897. More Sheridan LeFou. Bram Stoker, Dracula. When is Dracula written? Dracula. There's also 2 versions of Dracula, apparently. (1897).
I mean, the only reason you're in love with her is because she cast a spell on you.
No.
Yes. Sad but true. Nancy, get off the bed. Look, you scared the shit out of him. Thank you
More
very
Bram
much.
Stoker.
Let's go. No. He's gotta pay.
The Vampire.
You're just jealous.
When is this one written?
Jealous? You don't even exist to me. You are nothing. You are shit.
Quit giving me copyright issues. You fucking asshole. Quit giving me copyright issues, you.
Before The Craft,
Fucks.
if you want to talk about, like, people are like, yeah, witches aren't sexy. Who said, like, people were trying to sexualize witches?
I am beautiful. Boys will love this.
Hey, Cupcake, don't I get your phone number, your area code? You want my route schedule?
Oh, that would take me in the morning.
No, I wouldn't. Still believe.
Dude, you have literally sexy vampires in Fright Night. Come on. And you're giving me copyright issues. I'm going to stop. If you give one more
Let
clip.
me tell you how. The reason
One more clip, and I'm done with you guys for tonight. Let me check out, when was this one written? (1819). So the oldest one that we got is 1819. It's the oldest vampire story that we have.
Secretly a
Like I
witch,
said, if
stay
he
away from her.
memes,
But
if they meme one more clip, I'm just gonna call it a night, guys.
and people might dismiss this. They might be like, "Well, that was a children's movie, and the protagonists of that were children. So how could
So
they
was Hocus
sexualize
Pocus.
witches?"
Oh my
and I'm like,
gosh.
"Hocus Pocus, mother."
And Hocus Pocus is also like quite. I don't know if it could have been made today because actually the bigger sexual theme is with the adolescent male protagonist
being a virgin.
It will raise the spirits of the dead when lit by a virgin on Halloween night. What happened?
Okay, that's it. I'm done. I'm not doing this anymore. They're doing too many clips, and I really don't. I'm not fucking getting a copyright strike for these fucking douchebags. As much as I enjoy them, it's not worth it. So hold on. Let me switch over to. All right, this was fun tonight, except for the last part, which was frustrating. Fright Night, Vampire Lovers, Carmilla. I think it's called Behind the Red Door. I don't really know. There's like several of them. Sexy Witches have existed forever. Also, by the way, vampires needing virgin blood. There's a movie with Jim Carrey that actually has that, where he's and there's one with Jim Carrey, and there's one with a terrible one with Nicolas Cage, which again is all about a vampire trying to get virgin blood. So yeah, no, this is a very old trope. It's not new. It didn't start in the 90s. They don't know anything about vampire history. I might have to take this stream down right after it gets done posting, because I can't have any of those clips on my channel, because I don't want to get hit. All right, thank you all.